Hello, Crispy here to talk about my current Kickstarter, which encompasses the entirety of my webcomic, Ghost Junk Sickness. You can read the entire thing in print by backing the campaign, along with some exclusive goodies and bragging rights that you own a completed webcomic. Go to kickstarter.com/ghostjunksickness, the completed series, and get the completed set today.
Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
And welcome to Screen Tones, where we talk anything and everything webcomics. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that is pretty big in creative online circles right now, generative AI. I'm Verathane, my pronouns are she, they, and I make the webcomics Geralt and Witchwood.
And I'm Crispy. I use the pronouns she, they, and I create the comics Ghost Junk Sickness and Lunar Blight.
And I'm Ray. My pronouns are they, them, and I make the webcomics Overlord of Ravenfell and On
So,
Empyrean High.
generative AI. If you've been around social media in the past 2 or 3 years, you've probably heard of the major players in this scene already. Before we really get started, I want to make a general note that we here on Screen Tones are not experts in this scene. We're just artists also trying to wrap our heads around this whole explosion. And things are changing so quickly that there's a pretty high chance that in the time between us recording this episode and the time that it comes out, things will have changed yet again. So this won't be any kind of definitive take on AI. We're just doing our best to understand what's going on. So, what is generative AI?
Generative AI models generate text, images, videos, or other data using training data. The particular explosion has pretty much meant that you can generate pretty much anything, but it also relies completely on a huge model of essentially text, images, and videos that were taken without permission.
So essentially, we liked and understandably be so in this situation have our backs up because, like Ray said, the images, the text, the stuff that is being fed into this training data. There's quotes. I'm making quotes with my fingers. Is stuff that has been taken without permission, and it is our stuff that exists on the net that has been basically fed to be trained and to replicate all of this content. I am going to use that word in this situation for easy use of people not well essentially just not hiring people to do the jobs proper. A lot of spheres, specifically in our comic sphere, the creative sphere we're going to be tackling mostly during this episode, have really, really come under fire essentially with our own works being scraped and used for the profit of those with these machines that are taking our art, feeding it through something and creating something quite scary sometimes. And there have been a lot of moments for us to be understandably upset with how this is it's stealing our work in a lot of defense of them not properly paying people, saying that quote unquote anybody can do it, which is absolute horseradish. And she's a problematic
Oh boy,
topic.
yeah. I've seen some arguments from kind of the other side of it that basically are boil down to that AI is like a labor-saving tool that can help artists in the long run by speeding up certain processes that might be time-consuming. Some of the very earliest uses of AI, like I think before this whole generative AI thing was coming out, Clip Studio rolled out an auto coloring tool where you can basically use your line work and like run it through essentially a glorified filter that would kind of detect where your lines were and fill
Hmm.
them in with like pretty shading and like randomized colors or slightly more controlled colors if you gave it a special layer with swatches on it. And that was an early form of generative AI, which had been fed on a training database of like various coloring styles that were popular among the artists using Clip Studio. And at the time, that tool was like pretty popular. Like a lot of people were like, wow, this is really cool and fun to play with. And like, I'm just goofing around, like having a good time with this fun little tool. And now that generative AI has taken a much larger space in the scene overall. The feelings have definitely been changing towards it among the creative people out there, and part of the pushback coming from the AI side is still basically saying like, but why don't you should like this tool? You should be enjoying it because it can speed things up and you don't have to spend so much time on all this like grunt work. So we should just talk, give a bit of conversation about what the issues are.
Yeah, I do think that there might be quite possibly some legitimate uses for AI like that. The problem is AI is a very broad term, and it can be used for many, many things. And some tools are pretty nice for the like labor saving aspects, but those often don't use the images themselves. And when most people talk about generative AI being bad for artists, it's usually in regards to actually just making the image off of a few typed prompts and generating the entire image without any work or input from the artist other than touch ups.
And so you start to run into these problems where there also is a pattern of what has been scraped, a bias that comes into the stuff that is being produced by these things. And, a lot of issues with falsified information, um, just absolutely bonkers text being presented. One of the so a really, really good example, well, I wouldn't say good, but an interesting example of the chaos that happens when using these kinds of models that scrape art, steal stuff from folks is something that happened recently with the Willy Wonka's chocolate experience that had happened in Glasgow, Scotland, where somebody had absolutely scraped, stole all this art, fed it through the generative AI machine that pooped out concept art, events, mishmash of text that make no sense, and proceeded to create an event about it, and led customers to a empty warehouse of absolute nothing. I mean, scam in the app in the end with all of that stuff. But it was a good example of finding out the the lengths that people are going to be going towards using these kind of things, and just stuff to really start paying attention to. Apparently the the people responsible for the Willy Wonka's chocolate experience had also made a bunch of venues and events that totally made up everything that they have done with their body of content. I'm going to say content once again, um, just to make money fast. At the end of the day, that's unfortunately what it comes down to, is the exploitative nature of this. And when people were digging further, they found out that the man involved creating this had also scraped hundreds and hundreds of people's books and writings and stuff like that to quote unquote publish these AI generated books to make quick money. So it's disturbing all around to see um, everything that has been made from this. Well, this
It's
system.
pretty like that whole thing about like gonna actually call it content this time instead of art is like it's so telling because I feel like that's in a way the most insidious thing about this whole AI explosion, because it really is just distilling art back down to content. What we're talking
Mhm.
about with AI, it's no longer a creative vision, it's just content. It can churn out infinite quantities of mindless stuff, and that's what it's good for.
Mhm.
And anything created by this is inherently just going to be like regurgitated, like filler, basically.
I agree that calling it content is probably the most accurate term because art tends to have themes and a point and tries to communicate, where generative AI can really only retread what other people are doing.
Mhm.
And a lot of the times, because the AI model doesn't even know what themes or an artist's statement is, it will just take from everything. So essentially, even if you have someone that's like, oh, super amazing generative AI person, they really don't have the control and finesse of making these choices of
Mhm.
what goes where and what symbolism that might have in that itineration to essentially do what
The
artists
funniest
do.
thing to me is when like people who work in generative AI making graphics get angry about other people using the same prompts as them. Like this insane amount of creativity
Yes.
required to be like anime girl with long red hair, done in ArtStation style, trending on DeviantArt or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of us artists probably are aware of the idea man, the one that has $1 million idea that will make both of us rich if only we would draw their comic for free. And that's really what a lot of these AI wordsmiths feel like, and why they're so protective over their prompts, because they think it's the idea itself that has value rather than the execution of it.
Mhm. And it's something that we usually cover on like Screen Tones episodes when we talk about enjoying the process and having that be such a big factor um, when engaging with creating your story, art, writing, music, everything. And this is the scary part is that having these stable AI, open AI, chat GP go after the work and the process behind that and simply say it is their own. I know one crusty moment, unfortunately, I guess it's not a moment. One crusty thing of the many crusty things of DeviantArt is that it's absolutely drinking this up like no one's business because not to put on my tinfoil hat, but unfortunately, as far as the net goes, we're definitely entering an era of content farming and content creating and go 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 fast 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 create you must go and I fear that with these models that say it can make your idea faster than you can produce them, that is intoxicating to people. That is like, oh my goodness, I can finally make my really, really long story come to life because of this thing. And this is what they're going to be advertising with. And, you know, I look back to what DeviantArt is doing, and it's advertising the people who use these content producing machines, these art theft machines, and winning money for it, and getting commissions from it and stuff like that, and elevating the DeviantArt platform to what it is just hot trash. Unfortunately, rest in pieces for the art community, and it's sad. It's sad and scary. I think people have valid validity in saying they don't want to be replaced because the process is a part of you and it is what makes the art piece and the journey and the stuff that you create in the end all worth it.
Yeah, I think that this part about making content fast is almost disturbing because we are essentially already up to our eyeballs in every form of media, trying to compete for our own eyeballs. And honestly, you can't really compete with that. Even webtoon readers are talking about the number of debuts every day is exhausting to keep up with, and adding AI, making content fast and effortlessly is almost a detriment to people that are
Yeah,
already
I
like
feel like
reader
one of the
fatigue.
things it's I can tell this is a huge topic because for every single point that gets brought up, I think of like three new things that are like totally different that I want to say. But like on the topic of erasing like the part of that part of the process, I remember seeing. Unfortunately, I can't remember who posted this tweet, but there's a tweet that basically boils down to like, well, why don't I like get AI to like read books for me and watch television for me? Like if I'm gonna erase the thing that is actually enjoyable, like the people who are going to
Hmm.
benefit from removing the process from art, it's not artists who are going to benefit from that. We're not in this game because we
Yeah.
want to like not be making art. Like be nice to have an entire portfolio like just appear, like that gets you hired or whatever, but like what are you going to do with your time then? Like the art is the point. Making it is the point. So it's this
Hmm.
whole like mindset shift where I feel like the people who value the outputs of these kinds of machines are not necessarily the ones who want to be creatives themselves personally and spend their time doing and
Hmm.
thinking about creative things. They want to get that all over with so that they can make the money and then get back to, I don't know, what else do you do with your day when you're not making art? Um,
I will say, if they think that comics will make money, they are very wrong.
but you can produce
The
so
curse of
many
comics.
animated show pitches. Anyway, so I think it's probably time to move on to sort of the second question, which is kind of what are the issues that pertain kind of to everybody, not necessarily just artists? Because it is huge. It's in every field these days. It has vastly out encompassed the creative sphere, both online and in person. So
Hmm.
let's talk about it.
Let's do a Dunkin' Donuts dive. Um, I've kind of covered this, not covered it, but I mentioned it already before. But a lot of the unethical or incorrect information coming up, and now that Google search is just like again eating this, the search engine for Google is so bad. Oh my goodness, absolutely so bad. I currently use Firefox as a browser, and I love my uBlock origin. And there is, thankfully, from the community, a list that you can feed through my blocks that filters out all of the AI coming up. But because it's so rampant, like this stuff is still it's popping up new every time and feeding you misinformation that is it's laughable. It's actually really really
It's kind of
scary.
wild because it's not even necessarily just misinformation these days, but like Google image search has become so full of like AI generated graphics that if you look up references of things like
Mhm.
animals or like places and stuff like that, instead of getting real photography or real research, often you'll get like fake images that are just generated. I remember somebody was
Yeah.
sharing, they were looking for a
Yeah.
reference of, I think it was a tiger or something like that, like a very specific species of animal, and they were only getting like generated results of completely different things. And the funny thing with some of these prompts is that within the online sphere of overall content, some of it is no longer even being generated by like uh, the machine is feeding itself now. There's so much AI
Yeah.
generated content out there that the AI is now also being trained on other AI generated content instead of actual photographs and actual drawings. And it's getting stranger and stranger because it's just starting to like eat itself.
Yeah. That's actually called a Habsburg collapse, because it's essentially getting inbred, and it's been shown that it'll just get worse as time goes on because the AI will just keep inbreeding and inbreeding, and the results will
It's
essentially
funny, yeah,
just
there have
become
been these
stranger.
cases where like random bouts of like ChatGPT will start spitting out absolute nonsense for a few days, or like the image generators.
One time it
Yes,
went
I
to
remember reading about
Spanish
that.
Oh my
for 2
goodness.
And
hours.
it's funny because for all this talk about like removing humans from the equation, when stuff like that happens, it is people who have to go in there and clean that up. Like,
Well,
Yes.
that's the thing. That's another point that a lot of people don't realize is all our AI is being curated by real people, and they are being drastically underpaid.
Mhm.
There have been exposés about these AI companies using people in Kenya to curate all the sexual images and stuff like that out of these data sets for only $2 an hour or
Ugh.
less. So there's also a huge labor exploitation beyond the obvious labor exploitation of just firing everyone to save a buck.
Yeah. It's honestly it's scary because the other thing that I think about is back in the old days when you had to do some paper research and stuff like that, even for high school or whatever. I remember they were like, do not use Wikipedia because, it's not a credible source or whatever. Go to the
anybody can
library and
edit
stuff
it.
like that. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
there was an era where it's just like more of it is being curated by professionals and blah blah blah, and it's getting sourced in a way that is better than it was. I will say, and now we're kind of flip flopping back on this stuff invading sources that could have been used, and there, I have many nibblings and I fear some of the things that they have told me that they found out on the internet, coming from a lot of this crazy AI generated stuff that makes absolutely no sense and it's completely just mangled because it's that Ouroboros of eating itself into this
Oh
weird
man, yeah. What's even
mess.
happening to the strange world of weird YouTube videos that mash up Elsa from Frozen with Spider-Man
Yes.
building, I don't know, Minecraft palaces and having orgies or whatever?
Yeah.
Oh my god. There is also the legitimate fear of plagiarism because a
Yes.
lot of these AI models can be fitted to essentially just outright copy certain images and texts and stuff. And this is especially obvious when it comes to Chat GPT, to the point that a lot of teachers have disallowed it. But the problem is a lot of the tools that use like the detection for AI are AI themselves.
Hmm.
And you will have to remember that AI is just built off of training data. You get a lot of false positives because of that, because they are using the actual sources that the AI is trained off of. I actually have a nibbling that got accused of using AI because the detection software said it was 50% or something like that.
Wow.
Where when you consider the fact that AI is a model trained off of training data, things like Shakespeare and the Bible will come back as 80% AI
Hmm.
generated because it's used so often as a training model,
Hmm.
especially when you're talking about teenagers that are using like a source or something and might use words from that actual text. And the same can be said for artwork is you'll see a lot of artists with very popular, very commercialized styles get accused of using AI when they're probably the most common to put into these training data sets themselves.
I've seen artists like basically point out like when someone basically recreated their work uh, almost accidentally in AI. Like somebody will post like a landscape that was done via AI, and the artist will spot it and be like, "Hang on, that's like exactly my work," which it turns out had been scraped and fed into the data set. So it'll use varying proportions of things. Like essentially the way these tools work, they're sort of a predictive algorithm. So ChatGPT is a predictive algorithm for text, and Stable Diffusion is a predictive algorithm for pixels, essentially. And it'll stitch things together and remix things and blend them together. And it doesn't necessarily know like where the boundaries of one thing is versus another thing. Like if you tell it to make a table leg, it's going to look through all of its various pixels that are tagged as table legs and put those together, but it doesn't know what a table is. So it'll do all kinds of funky stuff with perspective. And then sometimes it'll just happen to find a lot of pieces of table leg that all came from the same image, and it'll just spit out that picture almost unaltered. You can't really control
Mhm.
whether it does that, and you just have to hope that the right person spots what it's doing and points it out.
Yeah. I know another issue, one of the bigger issues with using these OpenAI and Stable Diffusion and ChatGPT is the energy consumption involved with the software using and going through its database to spit out this content, and it is worrisome with how much energy it does use. Doing some research on it, finding out that one image could basically power your fridge for a few hours and stuff like that. I'm just like, that's so much. That's so much just to steal from someone to create your content, and that's how much it used to do that. So you can imagine somebody, content farming a lot more to make a comic or do the YouTube stuff because it's invaded that
Man, imagine if NFTs
exponentially.
were still a thing.
um
I feel like they were starting to die just as this got started, but if they were both exploding at the same time, like, oh,
yep.
I feel like the AI thing started because the NFT bros lost.
I think so. I think so. I think this is just like a definite path of another
Get
make
get
money.
rich quick scheme.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And when we talk about making content and using this word to describe what they're doing, it is like Ray and Thane had said, like it's just you're taking the process out, you're taking the creation out of it. So it's just what is the point? Well, the point is to just get money. And from what I mentioned with the DeviantArt example of DeviantArt showcasing this one content creator, I'm not going to call you an artist, content creator as making, I can't even remember. I think it was $2,500 or $25,000. It was just nuts that month on AI generated art. And I'm like, well, that's great that they stole from so many people on the same website, probably, and got to, walk away with that money essentially. And I think on top of the energy consumption and the outsourced labor and all of this, um, the fear of people who are not as in tuned with what's going on with this recognizing what generative AI is, against like an actual piece of art that an artist create and not being able to tell the difference, and that's getting a little scary now,
it's
because
figured out
it's
hands.
trained on so much stuff and it's figured out hands. That that used to be the best way to
It
look.
still has a hard time with teeth, though.
Wisps
Uh,
of hair intersecting jewelry.
Now, I will say that one of the concerning things is while there are a lot of companies concerned with cutting costs, I do feel like this is ultimately going to bite them
Yes.
because there has been a ruling and generative AI images cannot be copyrighted. Now, You are getting a lot of companies that are starting to realize this, because if you can't copyright a work, that means less revenue for them. They won't be able to really take any recourse against piracy because you can't copyright that work in the first place. And just ultimately, it can be a risky way to lose profit if while you're trying to make a quick buck.
Which is, it's wonderful to see them get bit in the bum like this, but it it's worrisome because of, the now and the explosion now, just like how during the NFT stage of just absolute garbage nonsense happening and affecting others, while creating these things to get rich quick, ruining the environment. Thanks, guys. It's you can see why it's such a big concern.
It's definitely had major implications on just labor in general, though. I know that it's pushed a
Hmm.
lot of people out of jobs, not within art, but in all kinds of other fields too, like customer support for any big corporation that has like
Yes.
web-based like chat support or phone support. A lot of that now, and for the past, it's probably been this way for at least a year, maybe two now. All the people who used to be employed to like pick up the phone and answer questions from customers have been completely replaced with AI, which is a vast number of jobs
Hmm.
for that sort of thing. And companies like I think like Uber and DoorDash and things like that, as well as like Lyft, they're using these also to like control certain parts of like figuring out who gets matched with like what order, that sort of thing, all of that. And if you ever have an issue with their services and you want to go like to their customer support to find things out, you're just going to be taken in an infinite loop. I talked to
Hmm.
so I was on a taxi ride and I started talking to the driver of the cab, and it turned out that even for employees at the company they were working for, if they had issues with their job, as like people who were like getting a salary, they would be referred only to AI. They couldn't get a hold of a real person if they were having issues with their actual livelihood, which I think is pretty worrisome for everybody involved in that transaction.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, very, very frustrating as someone who has definitely tried to call customer support for, I haven't even, I can't remember what it was for exactly, but it was something urgent. It was something either uh, banking related or anything like that. And you get put into these calls that are so frustrating to deal with that it's just like, are you dealing with this or are you dealing with that? And it's like, no, like my problem is a little bit more nuanced, and it'll keep repeating itself until you go through their little questionnaire to get siphoned into an answer that does not solve your problem. And it's hard because they also put you through a gauntlet to finally relent and give you a human, and that could take like half an hour on top of waiting. So it's just, I'd rather just be kept on hold.
And another thing that people need to realize about generative AI and all machine learning is any programmer will tell you garbage in, garbage out.
Hmm.
A lot of people are treating AI as a way to be unbiased, because how can a robot machine be biased? And don't realize it's usually because the programmers are biased or the information that you're feeding them is biased. And when you indiscriminately just scrape everything, you'll get that bias.
Hmm.
And it's also just Thane talked a little bit about the taxi driver not being able to talk to a person, but they're also being surveilled and judged by AI, and some places are using it as an excuse to dock pay, and I think that's just disturbing
Hmm.
when you also consider the fact that all this data is indiscriminately scraped from the internet. There have also been people who have found their medical records in the data. which is a violation of several laws.
There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of really awful stuff going on in there, which leads me to the third.
Oh yeah, I've
Sorry.
I've seen I've seen people say that they found photos that were taken by their Roomba.
Oh my
Ugh.
gosh.
I've seen
Yeah.
graphics of
Yeah, you really don't know, like, where all these images are come from, and that's a little bit disturbing for something that just gets fed into AI.
Mm-hmm.
is there any hope?
Small voice. Is there any hope?
It certainly does seem like a hopeless situation, but there are several lawsuits against like nearly every single machine learning right now.
Mm-hmm.
One is against all these image generative AI and also DeviantArt because DeviantArt did
Uh-huh.
that. So that's probably the main one that's of good concern to artists, but is by no means the last. There's some going against ChatGPT, some going against the ones that are using programmer data to make new programs. There's just all this lawsuits that will hopefully help guide restrictions that will protect our privacy, our copyright, and our work.
I think something else kind of neat that I heard about, which like just anybody, like any artist who posts work online can make use of, is there's a company making a couple of tools. One is called Glaze, which you can apply to an image before you upload it online, and it basically applies a very subtle, I don't want to call it a filter because I feel like it's a bit more technical than that, but basically it makes very subtle changes to the image that are almost indistinguishable to the naked eye. Like you can't tell just by looking at it with your human eyeballs whether an image has been glazed. But if it gets fed to one of these training databases, it just won't register. There's also from the same people is a program called Nightshade, which almost does the same thing as Glaze, except that it also takes it a step further and will start messing up the training database. So this is if you want to do something called data poisoning to their training data sets. A lot of what these programs rely on in order to create these images and like text chats that the people using them want them to make, that predictive text thing, basically telling people like, is this an image of a tiger or a car or a bicycle or a motorcycle or a dog or whatever, like basically a massive system of tagging that will connect relevant pixels to the prompts that users type in. And Nightshade will disrupt that. It'll give it an image that you've fed to it, and it'll detect that your image is like whatever is actually in it. It's going to tell the training data set that it is something different. And if you poison a data set,
Mm-hmm.
it means that if somebody types in tiger, they're going to start getting pictures of random other things instead. Or maybe the same other thing every time. Maybe now this data set just straight up thinks that a tiger is a puppy or a like refrigerator or something like that, which could lead to some pretty funny results and probably be very frustrating to the people trying to use it to create reams of content that they can monetize in some way.
I have seen some people very angry about that and being, "Oh, why are you ruining this awesome thing?" And I'm just like, "Y'all told us to adapt, so we are."
Adapt, overcome. It is sad in how much this has ruined a lot of, opportunities and careers, jobs, art, portfolios, many things. This is a damaging endeavor that these tech bros and make money fast schemes really dive into. I do believe that in all this kind of, I mean, it sounds like doom talk, but I think that there's just a rise and fall. There's a boom to this, or a bust to this boom. Sorry. And it's coming. I know that it's coming because when you talk about these issues, when you arm yourself with information and learn what generative AI is actually doing, and seeing these content farms and stuff like that for what they are, is just mindless content for money. When you start to get into that, and you tell your peers, your family, and make everybody aware of the situation, it's going to lose its luster. These people who are taking thousands of pieces and whatnot from people, they're going to be the losers in the end. It might take a little bit, and there are going to be a lot of hurt people along the way, but I don't think this is the future.
So, one plus side about this whole AI thing is I do believe a bust is going to happen because investors have started to lose faith in the product because, well, one, the CEOs have made grossly inflated claims on what these tools can do, but also because people's trust has been undermined by using AI. And also, there is just the fact that AI is grossly expensive,
Hmm.
both in energy and just cost of curating the data. And every time you generate something, it actually tends to lose money.
Hooray!
Once all the investors abandon it, I do think there's going to be a huge bust, just like the NFT thing.
Music to my ears. The downfall of evil.
But also, there is just the fact that for most people, they do want that human connection that art can make. And if you can't really be bothered to even make the thing that you're putting out, most people won't even bother to look at it.
And you know what's a really great solution? If you're an idea guy, listen to this. I got something really awesome. It's going to blow your mind. There's these things called commissions. And you can take your idea and you can be like, where am I going to find these artists, these musicians, writers, whatever? There's platforms for it. VGen is a great example. Why don't you hop on over there and see who's open and see who matches your style that you're looking for, and throw them some money, maybe tip them, and you can get something that's created by a human that will feel awesome, and it's your idea.
Also, you can do this amazing thing called revisions, where if the first image that they make doesn't look quite right, you can tell a
Mhm.
person, can you just like nudge the arm a little, change the color of the shirt? And they'll be like, okay. And they'll charge you a little bit of extra money, but you won't have to spend hours and hours attempting to regenerate the same image over and over to get the arm
Mhm.
moved like 2 inches to the left.
And also, the teeth and eyes will look pretty good usually.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I think this is a roasted red pepper and goat cheese wrap.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening. I've been your host, Farah, and you can check out my work at witchwoodcomic.com and cheralt.sevensmith.net.
And I'm Crispy. You can check out my work at ghostjunksickness.com and lunarblight.com.
And I'm Ray. You can check out my work at empyreancomic.com, and Overlord of Ravenfell is on Webtoons.
Wahoo!
We'll see you later, slappers.
Yeah, go read those comics. Go get a commission. Go do that.
You know, if I'd
Support.
been told like a year ago that robots could make art, I'd be like, rad. And now I'm like, damn, but they're doing it instead of me. That's lame.
It is lame. And they're stealing at the same
Yeah.
time. They're not
You could
making
at least
it.
make me a latte, and so I can draw better and later.
Robots to bring me a latte while I draw.
Thank you for listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. We are supported in part by the fantastic folks at Hiveworks, home of many amazing independent webcomics. Check out their store at hivemill.com to find ebooks and print books of many fine Hiveworks titles. We're also supported by, well, listeners like you over on Ko-fi. Drop us a few bucks if you enjoy what we do and want to help us continue talking about anything and everything webcomics. And don't forget to give us a follow on Blue Sky and Tumblr so you don't miss an episode. You can find links to all of those at screentonescast.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.